And we're going to focus now, we're going to shift a little bit to what may be something that can happen after a large amount of social isolation as a risk for increased elder abuse, and what is that all about? So we have Adele Hirschfeld. She's more or less new, I think, to our GEC family, right? You know, we haven't had her as a speaker, but she attends just about everything that we present. And this is a family, whether you know, right? Okay. And there's the bio. She's a social worker here at UTMB in geriatric ambulatory clinics. And she's very active in the community, and she's going to be doing this talk along with Rachel Portney, who's also a social worker with Adult Protective Services. And
okay, I am so glad that Dr. Grumbles talked about social isolation and the things that she talked about. I'm going to focus more on abuse. Isolated seniors do have a greater potential for being abused for multiple reasons. Rachel, I've asked Rachel to be here as the expert, if you will, with Adult Protective Services. So if there are technical questions, I've never worked for Adult Protective Services. I work with a lot of the investigators that help our patients in Galveston County. And this is an interesting topic. I'm not, everybody can read the goals. We've already talked about some of the things. Okay, some statistics. The Department of Justice keeps statistics, and in 2010, 9.5% of the elderly population was abused. This is nationwide. The median age was 77.9 years, so 78 years of age, if you will. 67, just over 67% were female. Of the cases, 58.5 were neglect cases, 12.3% were financial, 15.7 physical abuse, 7.3 emotional, 0.04% were of a sexual nature, and 5.1 were other. Now, specifically in Texas and Galveston County, in 2011, statewide, there were almost 88,000 reports of possible abuse reported to Adult Protective Services. And of those, just over 58,000 were confirmed. In Galveston County, 991 cases were investigated, and 513 were substantiated. So basically, statewide, 66% of the cases reported were confirmed. In Galveston County, 52% were confirmed. And then in Galveston County, 1.5% of persons aged 65 and over were abused. So Galveston County is under some national and state statistics. What that means, I can't begin to tell you. It could be that people aren't reporting, or maybe it's just that we have an awareness and people are not engaging in the activity that will come to cause them serious problems. Now, probably everyone in here knows that there's a duty to report. And while we're focusing on 65 and over, the state investigates claims of abuse or charges of abuse for children from newborn to 18 years old, any person age 65 and over, and any disabled person of any age. So you might run across a 45-year-old who's isolated and being abused. That's possible. So, and in that case, you have a duty to report. Who must report? Physicians, nurses, physical, occupational, speech therapists, mental health professionals, social workers. There may be others, but as a social worker, if I know abuse is going on and I don't report it, I can be charged with criminal activity. And that's not something I want to do. That causes me to lose my license. So what must you report? Any outcry of abuse. Patient says, my family's abusing me or my son's abusing me. Any outcry. Any suspicion of abuse. A patient comes in, they've got a black eye, and their story changes or it doesn't match. That's a suspicion that there may be some abuse going on. Could be that you've got a demented patient who fell yesterday, doesn't remember that they fell, and they did injure themselves and get a black eye. But it is not your responsibility or your requirement to investigate that. Who should make the report? It helps as the person who has firsthand information. If the patient outcries to you, you report. You have all of the information that was delivered. If you are the person with suspicions, you are better able to verbalize what it is that makes you suspicious that that abuse has occurred. Now, you can call in your report to the 800 number. You can make your report online at the Texas Abuse Hotline. Now, a lot of people, especially teachers, do not like calling in because I hear stories where I waited 45 minutes for somebody to come on the phone and take my report. So using the online would be optimum. You can usually make a report in less than 10 to 15 minutes. But there may be some circumstances that you don't want to leave it to a written report, that you actually want to talk to a person. Maybe the information you have is real sketchy. They've outcried, but I'm not clear who the abuser is, not clear what happened, but this is what I observed. In the clinic, I work in the 2 geriatric clinics. I am frequently advised that there's suspicion or a patient outcried, and I'm the one who gets to make the report. And I do the very level best I can. But there may be occasion when the doctor or the nurse or some other medical professional in the clinic might get a call from the investigator that says, can you give me some more information? Once the report is made, I may never hear from the investigator after the initial call. Normally, I am called within 24 hours after I make a report just to confirm details. If the triage staff has any questions about the report, they'll call and ask more questions.
Do you mind if I...
Go ahead.
Hotline.org is a great way to make a report, and especially for individuals who are busy professionals like yourself, you might not have the time to be on hold for 45 minutes. But like Adele said, when you have sketchy information or if you want to talk something out with an operator, it's good to call. It's also good to call if you are very concerned for that client. If it's a life or death situation, if you think it's a priority 1 case, a priority 1 case means we need to go out there and see that client within 24 hours. Maybe it's severe neglect, like that they're living in a situation where they don't have running water, they don't have medication, they don't have electricity. Maybe they're bedbound, and they're laying in feces. Things to that severity, you're going to want to call it in, because that means that we can get out there and see that client immediately. When the reports come in through our email system, we might only check that server 3 or 4 times a day, so 6 to 8 hours could go by before we could go out there and see that client, and if we get the phone call, we could go out there immediately.
They will call in their reports like 9 o'clock at night or 6 o'clock in the morning when there are fewer calls coming in, so that is something that you can do. And then, of course, if you feel that this is physical abuse and that possibly death is imminent, you dial 911 and you get the police involved. We've got to secure the situation. If the patient needs to be removed, the police can do that, and then APS will be called in to do the further further investigation. Okay, so what are the types of abuse that are recognized? Now, really, APS has 3 categories, but I've always seen 5. What the state recognizes is physical, neglect, and financial exploitation. But of course, there's physical abuse, and then neglect, and we'll get into more details. Emotional abuse is quite common, sexual abuse, and the financial exploitation. Now, the new health care legislation that's being phased in over time has some specific, if it's funded, has some very specific consequences for persons who financially exploit elderly persons. But it hasn't been enacted yet, it hasn't been funded, so we're still going to be surprised by that. Okay, so physical abuse is things like hitting, they're being struck, slapped, punched, pushed. And something that nursing homes are very aware of, but can happen in the private home, is restraints. Being tied down, tied up, locked in, locked up. Medication used to keep the person nice and chilled so that the family can do something else that they want to do, or the caregiver can do something else they want to do. Injuries, broken bones, cuts, things of that nature where it's maybe they're showing up in the emergency room or the clinic to have a cut sewn up. Being the target of something that's thrown. Their loved one got angry at them and threw what was in their hand. Okay, there we go. And then I can't tell you how many times we get calls. Mama won't eat. Mama won't drink. Mama won't take her medication. Can I force her? No. And there's some ways to get around that. And the quickest, easiest way is, okay, she won't do it right now. Come back in a few minutes. Mama, it's time to drink this water. It's time to take your medication. And maybe later they'll cooperate. That's maybe the last bit of control that they have in their life, and they're going to exert their control. Okay. Now, these are not all-inclusive. I'm sure that I've left some things out under physical abuse, but we'll go on to neglect and self-neglect. Neglect and self-neglect. Not having medication, not picking it up, or not taking it. They've got it, but they don't take it. Lack of food and nutrition to maintain health. Being left alone or unassisted when assistance is necessary. This person has trouble getting up out of the chair. Once they're up, they're able to walk to the bathroom, to toilet, but then they need help getting back to their chair. So this can be neglect. Inadequate or inappropriate clothing. There we go. I get concerned when I see a patient come to the clinic and they have on their night clothes. Well, when I look closer, it's maybe their robe. And then it's a question, is this really appropriate? Is it not appropriate? If they come in, and it's obvious they've been outside today when it's cold and windy, and they've got on a flimsy t-shirt, and they're not dressed appropriately for the weather conditions, that's something else to think about. Being forced to wear soiled clothing. They're always soiling themselves. I'm not going to change this time. I'm going to wait till the next time. That's just not appropriate. And then being forced to stay in an environment that's too hot or too cold. This might be because the person, say in the case of self-neglect, they don't want a high electric bill or a high gas bill, so they're not running the heat on a day like today. Or in July or August when it's 95 degrees or more, they're not in a cool room. Those are examples of neglect. emotional issues. We don't hear about this too much in the clinic, but it's there. Verbal abuse, name calling, cursing. And sometimes when you get super stressed and things aren't going right, you just find that things slip out. Maybe you didn't mean to say them. That's different than berating the person that you're providing care for. Humiliation is a form of emotional abuse. Harassment. Come on. Coercion. Being ignored. And this can be talking over someone. Maybe mama has some dementia and doesn't really understand what's going on, but she does know that you're talking about her. And so including, if the person's in the room, including them in the conversation. I got so tickled with a patient one day in the clinic. Her daughter was there, and the doctor talked to the daughter. Okay, how many times do we do that? Patient, very demented, looked at the doctor and said, "I'm here, I'm capable of making my own decisions." Yes, ma'am. So be aware. It's remarkable what you can communicate to the family, talking to the patient. And then intimidation. In sexual abuse, I'm glad that the incidence of it is so low, but things like fondling, of course, rape, transmission of sexually transmitted disease, and then being forced to watch or view pornography. If they don't want to, they shouldn't. Being forced to watch is a form of sexual abuse. Financial exploitation. Now this is, okay, failing to pay bills. That's pretty much obvious. Diversion of funds. Well, I'm going to borrow some money from mom, and she won't remember it, but I'll pay it back next month. Transfer of property. And I'll get into that a little bit more. Stolen property. Maybe there's a paid caregiver that comes into the house, and all of a sudden, jewelry starts disappearing. That's financial exploitation. And that is criminal from the standpoint you can call the police, but there's also the risk that the loved one, for fear that this provider might do something to harm them, will say, "Oh, I gave it to them." So it's a challenge. Buying unnecessary items. This can be somebody who calls. When I was going to school, Adult Protective Services had a case where a woman went on home shopping club, and she'd buy 10 of an item. Now, she had plenty of money, but it turned around. She was such a frequent caller that Home Shopping Club started calling her direct before the item came up. It was kind of, "Do you want in on this before we make it available to everybody?" So you gotta watch out for those things. So if you're seeing a patient in their home and all of a sudden they've got 20 boxes stacked up, and well, what's that? "Oh, those are things I bought." If they're using them themselves, that's one thing. If it's a gift for family, that's another. But if there's 10 items and they all look to be identical, something's off. Okay, as far as transfer of property, diversion of funds, when it comes to Medicaid, there are certain financial criteria. And there's a lot of bad information out on the streets about, well, Mama's got all this money, so we need to take it out of Mama's name. And that can come back to bite seriously. There are ways legally to protect assets so that the outcome is what the parent wants. Transferring assets can not only be financial exploitation, but when it comes to the point of having to apply for Medicaid, there is a 5-year look back. And if at year four and a half, or 4.5 years in, you know, we've transferred the house out of Mama's name. And now at 4.5 years, looks like Mama's going to need to go into long-term care. We're going to apply for Medicaid. Application is submitted. And the state says, oh, okay, you transferred a house. Tell me more. $300,000 house. You know, maybe $100,000 was still owed on it, got a $200,000 settlement. The state's going to say, oh, well, that $200,000 should be spent for Mama's benefit, so you're going to have to pay so many months worth of care until all of this, virtually all of this $200,000 is gone. But it starts on the day the state finds it. So it doesn't matter that it's 4.5 years later. It's that the state found it during the 5-year look back. So now Mama can't have any nursing home care paid by the state under Medicaid until that $200,000 is spent. And chances are that that money, you know, Mama said, oh yeah, you know, go and you know, buy a new house for yourself, and you know, well, this would be yours when I died anyway. And now the family can't do that. So if there are assets that you know the patient is concerned about, I recommend patients talk to an elder law attorney, which that person has a different experience, and they know how Medicaid and VA and various financial vehicles fit together versus a wills and probate attorney. You want specialized knowledge. In a presentation that an attorney made, I have no idea what it is, but there is a special clause or a special exemption that allows a person to keep like $800,000 worth of asset, and the state can't touch it. Well, I'm certainly not going to give that advice. I'm going to direct them to an attorney to guide them. You know, if there's a way to legally protect your money, I believe everybody should do it. There are ways to legally protect the homestead, but you need to talk to a lawyer that's a specialist. And they don't have to be board certified, but they need to have that specialty. Any questions about that? Okay, got a case study. This gentleman ran into him before the hurricane. 86-year-old, seen in the clinic, routine follow-up. He came in the clinic, he appeared well-groomed, was using his walker to ambulate. The physician goes into the room, spins around, comes back out. He smells terrible. The doctor cannot stay in the room any length of time. Her eyes started watering. His smell was so bad. She wanted APS involved. Now, this man was cognitively intact. Guess what happened? He didn't realize that there was a problem. And he had some functional disability that it was difficult for him to get into the bathtub. Okay, I did what the doctor said. Call APS. Well, he's cognitively intact. If he doesn't want to take a bath, he don't have to take a bath. Okay? But APS was able to negotiate a solution. He had home health services in place, and he agreed to allow a home health aide to come to the house on the morning that he had doctor's appointments and assist him with bathing. Once home health pulled out, he agreed to hire a private duty company to come in and help him bathe. He had the money, he just didn't realize he had a problem. So, I mean, that was pretty benign, but the doctor was so funny. Every time he came to the clinic, has he taken a bath? Has he taken a bath? And it was pretty bad. Okay, second case. This one was was after I came back from the hurricane. We had a 75-year-old female in clinic for post-hospitalization examination, and she was hospitalized because her blood pressure was too high. The patient reported to the doctor that she had no medication and her electricity was turned off. In the epic note, the doctor saw that the home health nurse had called the day before and to advise the doctor that the home was in bad repair, the oven and stove did not work, the freezer was full of prepared meals, but there was no microwave. Okay, so we've got a freezer full of food, but no way to cook it. Then the nurse examined further and discovered that the hot water heater had been red tagged. So there's not even hot water in the house. So the doctor questioned the patient further and found out that the nurse had not made a report to APS at this point. The patient further informed the doctor that her son paid her utilities. Okay. I'm sorry?
Doesn't look like he did.
Well, as it turned out, this son had a drug problem. And he showed up at Mama's on the 3rd of the month. Give me your check, Mama. I'll go get it cashed. I'll pay all your bills. And then she wouldn't see him for 2-3 weeks. He wasn't paying the bills. The son is her only child. She doesn't want to get him into trouble. Luckily, the weather was moderate. It was April, and it was pleasant weather, not too cold, not too hot. But she has no other family. And it's like, what are we going to do? So we called APS. APS was able to find a niece who loved her aunt very much, came and talked to her aunt, said, Auntie, come live with me. Auntie agreed. So APS facilitated the niece becoming the representative payee for the patient, and the patient moved up to Houston, and as far as I know, has lived happily ever after with her niece. We do not know what happened to the son, but if he's living under a bridge, he's living under a bridge. Now, frequently, we do not have nurses tell us what they find in the house, the home health nurses. We had another patient that, when we called the nurse, tell us what's going on inside that house, you're there. We find out there's all kinds of things that, don't you think it would have been good for us to know that? And then also we find that I didn't make an APS report. And I'll ask him, have you made an APS report? No, I don't want to lose them as a patient. Well, personally, I'd rather lose them as a patient in the clinic, and we have lost patients in the clinic, than to hear that they died, and it was because they were living in a house that had no heat, and they froze to death. So, the last example, this one was a tough one. This woman, retired, had a very responsible job. She had dementia, documented dementia. And she had been in the hospital, and she was advised, you need to have someone with you. You don't need to live by yourself. She had never married, she had no children. And so she hired 24/7 help. We think everything's working. So she reappears in the hospital. She does have a couple of nephews, and we have the phone number for one of the nephews. So the case manager calls the nephew. He starts looking into things. He lives out of state. And then he calls me, and he says, something's wrong. He says, my aunt is paying close to $1,200 a month for these private caregivers. Is that a reasonable expense? You can stay in a nursing home for $5. Yeah, it's probably right on target for private in-home, but still, that was a bit over the top. And that this patient, if she was eating well-balanced meals prepared in the home, she would not have had a lot of the problems she had. CHF, somebody monitoring her medical condition or making sure that she got her medications. We didn't even know for sure that she was getting her medications. But they weren't cooking for her. Miss So-and-so, give me $20 and I'll go over to Whataburger and pick us up some lunch. Miss So-and-so, give me 20 bucks and I'll go over to Shrimp and Stuff and pick us up dinner. They were using takeout to feed this patient, and the patient was paying for it. So not only were they getting well paid, but they had free meals. So we'll call the nephew that I talked with Bill. Bill was the nephew who was concerned about his aunt. He came to town. He was concerned that his brother, we'll call Tom, would take advantage of Auntie. Tom was just getting out of prison, and he was going to come take care of his aunt. She needed him. Okay. So, plus he had been imprisoned for financial exploitation of his own parents. So, yeah, this kept getting weirder and weirder and weirder. Now, the patient was able to make good, sound decisions with the information given to her. She couldn't remember it 2 minutes later. So when she agreed, yes, her caregivers that she had hired were probably soaking her and needed to be fired, and they needed to find another arrangement that was more cost-effective. And the son took her home to fire the caregivers. They said, no, we're not leaving. So the nephew calls the police, and the police ask the patient, do you want them gone? I don't know. She couldn't remember. So the Bill's hands are tied. He can't do anything. The police can't do anything. The patient can't remember anything. We know she's being taken advantage of. She does give Bill her POAs, her medical and her financial power of attorney. So Bill is able to go to the bank, move money around, block the caregivers from being able to get any more money. What they would do is, Miss So-and-so, why don't you sign this check and I'll go get you some money at the bank. She wouldn't know how much they were drawing out. And then when her account was running low, she'd just call the bank president and have him move money out of her savings. She had been very frugal over the years. She'd just have him transfer money over. She wasn't able to keep track of how much money was going out. So eventually, it's apparent we've got to do a guardianship. The doctor does the paperwork. We send it over to the probate court. We've got that going, and then it becomes obvious we've got to get APS muscles in this. So we call APS. The guardianship is filed. The court appoints an ad litem attorney who becomes the temporary guardian for the patient. APS discovers that Bill might have done some hanky-panky with the money that he had access to. So that got all squirrely, but eventually, now we lost this patient in the geriatric clinic, but she's still seen at UTMB and is getting appropriate care. But this can of worms is something that happens with our patients. And I'm so glad to see some of the guardians here, our county guardians. Okay, so how do we recognize that there might be abuse going on, especially for our patients who are socially isolated? You know, they don't have, I love Dr. Goodwin when he comes in and he talks about his patients, you know, and with HIPAA we can't talk about another patient to a patient, but the patient can give us all kinds of information about the neighbor who's also a patient. And it's so funny, with all the information that we're able to obtain in a non-direct manner. And of course, we don't let anybody know that we got the scoop. But so, what are we looking for? In observations, we're looking for changes in the patient. Has their gait changed? Are they dressed differently? Yeah, they'd been taking their medications fine, and now they're not. And there might be some medical reasons for that, but there might be social isolation reasons that this is happening, or possibly abuse that's going on. Questioning the patient, not interrogating. No one in this room, other than APS representatives, are investigators. But we can question, because we do want to obtain information about what's going on. You know, is there something going on that I need to be concerned about to treat medically in the clinic, or to say, we need more information and we need to get an investigation going. So, things that might stir questioning the patient further. A suspicious bruise, their ability to bathe changes, complete chores. They're not able to cook anymore, or prepare food. So finding out what's going on here. Is it that their daughter, who was coming over and their social contact and making sure they had meals, has had her own health crisis, and the fallback is maybe not working as well as hoped? Listening to the patient. Okay, we have demented patients in the clinic, and they come in and they say some quite fantastic things, but we have to listen. There's a story that we share in the caregiver seminar of the patient in a nursing home who refused to go to bed. There was a man under her bed. Well, she had documented dementia, but she wouldn't go and go to sleep in her bed because there was a man under the bed. How many people would believe that? You know, it's her dementia. Somebody looked under the bed covers and there was a man under her bed. It was another resident who got lost, curled up under her bed to sleep. Okay? Weird things happen. And just because it sounds far-fetched doesn't mean it's not true. So listen, I read all of the notes from the doctors in the clinic, and when I read something between the lines like, what was really said here? I'll go talk to the doctor and find out, you know, well, do you think this is something that we need to look at further? Or do we want to wait till the next clinic visit that's in 2 weeks to see if there's a substantial change, you know, if it's temporary? The patient that comes in, and every time she comes in, my son is stealing from me, my son is stealing from me. The son's the caregiver. I make the APS report. Frequent flyer. She's always making this allegation against her son, and there's nothing going wrong. But, you know, after 20 investigations, and APS always finds that there's nothing to substantiate, that next one, the little boy that cried wolf, that next one could be the case where the son hit a rough patch, borrowed some money from mom with the intent of paying it back, and it doesn't happen. And, yeah, we're looking for changes in home. I can't tell you how many incarcerated children, when they are looking at being paroled to the community, will say, I'm going to go live with mom and dad. Well, you know, that might be a good thing, but it might be a very wrong thing. And that can be what happens to people, is that all of a sudden a child or grandchild who's been incarcerated has been dumped with them to keep an eye on them, you know, make meals, and that's not happening. So listen for changes. And then examination. Maybe you notice that the patient is limping when they come in, and the examination reveals not only a bruise, but it appears that there's more than a simple, oh, I fell and struck my knee on the concrete. Something more happened. Any questions to this point? Okay. Yes, sir.
This is for Rachel, I imagine. You could do this again, but is there, in terms of like a report to APS, and say it's found that there isn't any abuse going on, but is there a record of it? And so then how long does that stay on record, and is it a permanent record? Is there some way that you can, if the person that was accused of the abuse may have some negative impact on it for this? So how does that?
Great question. So when an allegation is made of abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation, we're either going to validate that yes, that occurred, or invalidate that it did not occur. If it did not occur, and then that person we do not see as a perpetrator, they will suffer no consequences. That case is going to stay in our system in perpetuity, that we'll have that record, but that record isn't going to go anywhere. That we invalidated on it, that no, you were not an alleged perpetrator. You were not a perpetrator. However, let's say we do find out that you financially exploited your mother, or abused someone, or neglected that individual's care. We are going to send that perpetrator a letter saying that we validated that yes, they are a perpetrator of this type of abuse, and depending on if it becomes criminal or not, that person is going to suffer consequences or not suffer consequences. For example, let's say you are neglecting the care of your parent, and we remove that parent from your home and put them in a nursing home, and you are, in our system, we have a record that you are a perpetrator of physical neglect. But the DA's office doesn't pick it up. The police department doesn't get involved. All we did was remove that person out of your care. You do not have a criminal record. So if you want to get a job at HEB or the surf shop, or Gumbo's or whatever, and they run a criminal background check on you, it's not going to come up. But we are going to put that information into a system for the helping field. I believe it's called EMR. So if you try to get a job at a group home, or if you try to get a job with a personal care home to give care to that clientele, it will come up. So it's only going to affect you if the job that you are applying for is under that area where they are looking at those sorts of things. But unless it goes criminal, like let's say it's financial exploitation, and we take you to court and you have to pay a fine, maybe that's like a Class A misdemeanor, it would only if it goes criminal will it be on your record.
Does that also include, for example, you applied for a job as a teacher, like in schools? Is that under that umbrella?
That's a really great question, and I don't know if ISDs look under the EMR system, but I tend to believe that they don't. I'm actually shocked daily at how many people have records and get jobs in systems where you would think that they would be looking at that. Let's say you committed physical abuse of an elderly in Louisiana, and it was 5 years ago, and you moved to Texas. We're only going to run your Texas background check. We're not going to run your Louisiana background check. And to do a federal background check, I believe it's $45, which doesn't seem like a lot, but if you're hiring 15 people a month, that agency might not want to pay, $180 on, every month for background checks, and so they might not run a federal background check.
Now, I was told that if an EMR is run for me, which is reasonable to expect, every report I've made, my name's going to pop up, but I pop up as a reporter, someone who reported a possible case. So, your name gets in the system, it's in there. But if it's in there for a good reason, it's okay. So, okay. Strategies for reducing social isolation in our patients in the clinic. Express concern for the well-being of the patient. I know that your spouse died 3 months ago. I'm really concerned that you're not re-engaging in activities and such. Encourage social engagement. Religious organizations, clubs, senior centers, volunteering. Ran into a newly widowed patient this week, and she's kind of at a loss. She lost all of her friends, the few that she had, because she was caring for her spouse. Well, now that she's gone, she's lost those relationships, and so she's looking, how can I re-engage? And when I threw out the idea of volunteering, because she didn't have a church, She didn't participate in any clubs. She liked the idea of volunteering, and there's plenty of organizations out there who need volunteers. It's a matter of what types of people do I like working with or serving, how much time do I have. And then offer access. I can't tell you how many people come in and they don't know what's available to them. And every community is different. And my experience is Galveston County. We have educational and leisure opportunities. Okay? College of the Mainland has a great senior program. Ollie here on the island has a great senior program. But they're not appropriate for everyone. The Area Agency for the Aging has services available. Catholic Charities, and these are also volunteer opportunities. Catholic Charities has a lot of programs. We've got social workers in the community. Necessary home health services, okay? That's the way we get a set of eyes in the house. And there's social stimulation with the nurse or therapist coming to the house. The home health aide coming to assist with bathing. And then encourage participation in programs specific to a disease. If you've got someone recently diagnosed with diabetes and they're not sure about the changes in their diet, there's groups out there that they can go and learn from others who have similar conditions. Other considerations that we deal with in the clinic frequently: depression. You know, if I don't feel like getting out of bed, I sure don't feel like engaging with anybody. I don't feel like this, I don't feel like that. Dementia is a big one. 50% of persons over age 85 are likely to have dementia. And it kills me when I see people talking to a 90-year-old as though they have dementia and they're sharp as a tack. Mm-hmm. So it's better if you treat everybody as if they're sharp as a tack, then you don't run the risk of insulting anyone. And dementia creates a lot of challenges with misidentifying events, not understanding what's going on, fabrication of things going on. They misplaced their watch. Somebody stole it. Somebody stole it. They just don't remember where they put it. So we get a lot of that. Transportation is an issue, even here on the island where we have good transportation services. When you get onto the mainland, if you're lucky enough to be in Texas City, Lamarck, their Connect does run a bus route. Dickinson has a bus route. League City doesn't. Island Transit up to the Victory Lakes area where the park and ride is the limit of the public transportation that goes into League City. Pain is an issue. You know, if you hurt when you get up and walk around, and you have to walk at the church to go and engage in an activity that you enjoy, you've either got to really enjoy it to work through the pain, or, you know, the weather changed and my knees are acting up, I'm just going to stay home. Well, if we all know the first time you miss, it's easier to miss the next time, easier to miss the time after that. There's a lot of fear of being taken advantage of by strangers. But what kills me is the fear of being taken advantage of by your loved ones. I can't tell you how many times a child would tell me, Mom wouldn't even give me $100 so I could go buy her groceries and return the change. Yet the man who came and knocked on the door and said, you need a new roof, she forked over the money for a new roof. And the roof was fine. Suspiciousness. This is a tough one for everyone. You know. Well, if I'm not around anybody, I don't have to be suspicious of anyone. Lack of financial resources, and one of the first things that I look at is if there is a cost involved, is there a scholarship program? You know, do they have funds to help people who are low income? And you'd be surprised at how many organizations will say, well, for this patient, we'll waive this cost. And then it might be that they enjoy, like Ollie has some charges for their participation in their programs. And I have not asked if they have scholarships, so don't call Michelle and say, I hear you've got scholarships and I want to enroll. But once the person gets into a program where there might be a cost and they enjoy it, then they might find a way to save money so that they can pay for it the next time. There's a group here on the island. My brain's going the wrong place. Okay, social history. If the person's always been a loner, they're going to be a loner. Okay? If they never had any friends, you're not going to get them to make friends now. And that's one thing I ask. You might have a very outgoing child who wants the patient, I want him to get out and do things. Well, did they do that before? Well, no, but they need to do it. I agree with you, it would be better if they did it, but chances are you're not going to get them to change their behavior at this time. And then there are medical treatments that can show signs that might be suspicious for abuse, okay? Can't tell you how many of our patients come in wearing long sleeves because the Coumadin that they're on for their AFib is causing them to have all kinds of bruises on their arms, and they don't want their children or their spouse to be accused of hurting them. Yeah, they haven't. They just bruise easy. It's a challenge dealing with patients who've become isolated. Due to no fault of their own in some cases. All of their friends have died. We had a patient at the end of the year. He had been functioning well and had no family. All of his family was gone. He never had children. And there was a friend that lived close. I don't know if they lived immediate, but they were close. And that friend got him to doctor's appointments, helped him get to the grocery store, but he had no obligation. He was doing it out of the kindness of his heart. And then the worker for the agency who had placed a provider in the home started confronting the friend. Well, why haven't you done this? And why haven't you done that? And, you need to do this. And he's like, wait a minute. No, I don't need to do this. So he pulled out. He said, I don't have to put up with this confrontation over something that's not my responsibility. I've been doing this out of the kindness. It was so extreme that he said, I'm not getting back involved. And I knew the friend. And I called the friend, I understand. He said, yep, that's happening. I'm not getting involved. Well, it ended up that an APS report had to be made for the patient. Fiercely independent, wouldn't do anything, socially isolated. But he had some behaviors that were appropriate for the mental health deputy to get involved. Got the patient over to appropriate care. Then he suffered a major health event that affected his ability to swallow. You see this man starting to spiral down. And there was no one to be his voice to tell the doctors what he wanted. And so he was at the mercy of the system. They provided appropriate care, but the man ended up dying in the hospital. And it was just sad to hear that had happened. So we never know what our activities are going to cause down the road. And we try to do what we think is best. The axiom for the doctors, do no harm. But sometimes you get people out there who are very aggressive and very assertive, and this isn't right, and you need to do this. It's like, time out. In the clinic, we had a patient, fiercely independent, lived by herself, dementia advancing. She refused to allow her daughters to do anything for her. And her daughters were very engaged and wanted to be there. And our concern was this patient living by herself, that if something happened at night, would she? So the daughters started trading nights, staying the night, and the patient agreed to that. But one day they're in the clinic and the patient hasn't been taking her medicine appropriately. She says, I can take my medicine, I know how to do this. And she was working off of information that was 10 years old. You know, it was the way she took her medication 10 years ago, because she couldn't remember what the doctor told her to do today. And even when the doctor wrote it down, she couldn't process it and convert that into today's activity. And the doctor came to me, we've got to make those daughters do something. We've got to make those daughters do something. It's like, the daughters are doing everything Mama will let them. The daughters are doing fine. And it was looking at it from a different, yeah, it wasn't optimum, but the daughters have to live with Mama. And if Mama closes the door to her daughters, then we've really got trouble. So it's weighing the patient's needs with what's best for them and getting the best outcome we can. But there are lots of factors that come into play, that nothing is going to be optimum all the time. Most of the information came from the dad's website. I did get the statistics from Statistics Brain, but it was Department of Justice numbers that were just assembled or there. And then, any other questions at this point? Yes, sir.
I imagine a lot of the different types of abuse are underreported, probably, especially sex abuse, for a lot of reasons. Anything that stands out on that? I know that there's, fear mentioned about, well, if I do anything, I'm going to end up in a nursing home. That type of thing, embarrassment, and, is there really a problem, and how do you recognize that? So, I mean, how do you address that if it's possible? I mean, I don't know.
Another great question. One thing that the Department of Family and Protective Services is doing, not just on adult protective services end, but on the child protective services end, is educating the community on what our role truly is and what services we can provide. There's a lot of myths that we're going to go in there and remove someone from the home and put them in a nursing home, and that's really not true. That only happens if it's medically necessary, that if the person stays in their home by themselves, that they would die because their medical or mental health condition is so severe, or we going to remove someone from the home, and that's done very rarely. And one way that we're educating the community is with people like myself. My title is Resource and External Relations Specialist. And then I've got a counterpart who her title is the Community Initiative Specialist. And those are kind of fancy titles for community liaison. So we go out in the community and we educate the public on who APS is and what we do. Our positions came out of Senate Bill 6 in 2005 to have greater community education. So we've been doing that for about 7 or 8 years now, and hopefully some of that information has been trickling down to the community so that they know what APS really does. The other piece of that is a lot of the perpetrators, most of the perpetrators in these scenarios are family members. And so I think it's going to be really hard for the victims to come out with an outcry, or to make a report, or to tell someone to make a report, because they know at the end of the day that's still their family member, and they don't want that family member to go to jail. They don't want that family member to suffer consequences. Or maybe they know, I'm not happy in this situation, but if my caregiver stops caregiving for me because I turn them in, then I'm going to have to go to a nursing home because no one's going to be a caregiver for me. So, we're kind of fighting that. We're fighting the embarrassment, and we just hope with continued education on what services and resources APS can assist with, that will continue to kind of fight that image, and we can get more people to make a report.
I really commend the work you do. It's
Thank you. And I would like to say, I know I'm talking probably to a room of physicians and nurses and medical staff. I have heard this in the past. It's been a while since I've heard this, but that physicians have not made, or nurses or someone in the medical community has not made a report to Adult Protective Services because they felt that the client would know it was them and then not come to see them anymore. And they felt that maybe they had a chronic condition such as diabetes or cancer or whatever the condition was, that they felt that them coming to the doctor was more important, not more important, but they didn't want that person to stop coming to them. So they made a decision to not report abuse and neglect. And that's frustrating because what's going on at home could be extremely severe. So I'm sure that y'all already know this, but real quickly, every report that you make is confidential. Adult Protective Services does not give the information of the reporter to the client or the family. And if you are concerned, you can always make an anonymous report. We prefer that you don't make an anonymous report because then we can have someone to contact to get more information if we need to. But you can make an anonymous report and not give your information. What we do see happen some of the times is A, you're the only person involved with that client, so they put 2 and 2 together to figure out who it is. Or we have seen clients where they play everybody, you know, oh, I know you called APS on me, I know you called APS on me, I know you called APS on me, and then the person who did call says, oh my gosh, I thought they weren't going to tell you it was me. Well, they just found out who made the APS report. So, you know, clients can be sneaky and get the information out. But it is against our policy, and it's illegal, and it would be immediate firing if a caseworker ever gave out the reporter's name. So if you ever have fear of being found out, know that wouldn't happen.
Very good. Okay, we have another presentation. Is there any other comments or questions? Thank you very much. A group of speakers, actually, who's going to introduce everyone. We're going to talk about guardianship. This came up because there's a lot of changes going on with guardianship, and it obviously goes hand in hand with social isolation and issues with elder abuse. And we have the Galveston County Guardianship Program representatives here, and Ms. Martha Branson is one of those that takes care of guardianship issues. She has a lot of experience in this area, and she's registered guardian and certified in human services and gerontology that she received at U of H. And that she has a number of other of her people that work with her that will introduce themselves. And then I think that'll be the end of the session. We have time for evaluation for that, as well as any other questions. So I have the presentation here. And I'd like to thank Misty Sullivan for sure for my communication with her and helping get this put together. So come on up.
Good afternoon, Martha Branson, Galveston County Social Services, and thank you for having us aboard. This is one part of the team here. These are my certified guardians. And so we have just a few sections of the program that we'll be discussing, and it's all related to guardianship. I'm going to start off by just giving you a little brief history of our program here in Galveston County. In the early 1960s, the probate judge and the director of Galveston County Social Services determined there was a need in our county to protect the elderly and the disabled individuals who were incapable of making decisions for themselves and handling their affairs. It was during this time that the staff of the department began to be appointed as guardians and representative payees. At the onset of a supplemental Social Security program, another group of people were needing payees, kind of to manage their money, to handle their funds, and we began noticing that increase in numbers, where there was again neglected and abused adults. So the Commissioner's Court of Galveston County made aware of the situation, and this resulted in the passage of a resolution on May the 5th, 1975, which designated this department to investigate those persons needing help and to handle and supervise funds to support such persons. The program was operated much the same way as it originated until October of 1996. Prior to that time, all staff acted as financial caseworkers and guardians. A major reorganization of the department divided the department into two major components, the financial caseworkers and the guardians. We were experiencing a growth in both areas, and it was becoming more difficult to manage both. So, just having given you a little bit of that history, we've been in existence for quite some time. So by now, those numbers, the needs are much greater than back in those early 1960s, with the growing senior population, and of course your number one abuse among seniors, which is exploitation. I wanted to just go ahead and also give you, now that I give you a brief history there, let me mention Judge Sullivan is our probate court judge. We work close hand in hand with the judge and her investigator and her staff, which is the auditor and other county clerks that are there filing the paperwork. So what is the guardianship program? Guardianship is a formal legal process where a court appoints and monitors someone called a guardian to make decisions for a person called a ward who does not have the capacity to make decisions. When a person is unable to provide food, clothing, or shelter, or to care for his or her own physical health and to manage his or her own financial affairs due to a mental or physical condition, he or she may be found to be without capacity or incapacitation. The purpose of guardianship is to protect persons from abuse, neglect, including self-neglect and exploitation, and to provide for their care. There is intensive training, of course, certification for the guardians. As I mentioned, the senior population, which is going to be our baby boomers. I'm right behind them. And you know, when you learn all of this over a period of time, you start having all these thoughts for yourself. You know, what are we going to do? What can I do to protect myself? And education is good for us. We need to learn that. We have a fine group of guardians, as I mentioned, and we only service Galveston County. There are probably, I want to say, 3 guardianship programs that are under the county courts in Texas. I know Harris County is one. That's a very large county. Dallas is another one, and San Antonio. The other agencies may have a payship program, or attorneys will take on the guardianships of estates and sometimes the individuals. So I'm going to let Misty come up and tell you a little bit about her section of what she does. And we all share all this, so just for today she will tell you what she does.
Okay. Guardianship, the guardians wear many hats, and we have many jobs to do that aren't defined and such. So it's just a whole wide array of job duties that are hard to describe in this session. So I'm going to go to guardian of the person. Guardian of the person, so what I'm going to do is review the process from the probate court and the hearing, and also define what guardianship of the person really is. Martha kind of touched on that, but I'll go in a little bit more detail. And the well-being of the ward has to do with the guardian of the person, and also alternatives. Okay, guardianship is something that we do not take lightly because it's stripping away one's rights. And so what we do, we get referrals from the probate court with the probate court investigator. In our county, it's Debbie Diaz. And this program, the guardianship program, is designed for those who cannot make decisions for themselves and cannot care for themselves. So it's not, it's something that we take very seriously and not lightly. The referrals could come from APS, the nursing home, neighbors or friends, or the medical community. And once the court investigator gets her referrals, then she goes on her investigation, and she investigates to determine if there is in fact a need for guardianship. Once that happens, then we get the paperwork. And so our program receives the paperwork, and we do our own investigation and prepare for the court hearing. We're under oath, so it's important that we do our investigation so we can make sure that there's not any missing pieces, or that there's correct information, or there's not any long-lost relatives out there. So once we have the court hearing, at that time we receive our guardianship letters. And it basically gives us the right to make decisions on behalf of our ward. Okay, every guardianship has to have a physician's certificate of medical examination. This is our probate judge, Judge Sullivan. She's a wonderful, compassionate judge. And on her webpage, you go right on the left and it says online forms. And there you can get the certificate of medical examination. And this is what the certificate looks like. And I had to squeeze everything in. And I have the arrow on the statement: prior to the examination, I informed the proposed ward that communications with me would not be privileged. And that has to be checked as yes before we can proceed. If it's checked no, the paperwork is rejected.
What does it mean?
What does it mean? It's a mental capacity assessment that the doctor does on a visit, or we have in-home doctors, house call doctors, that will do a assessment there. And it has to be with every paperwork, every guardianship paperwork, or it's rejected.
And that's an informed consent.
Hmm?
That statement makes an informed consent.
Yes.
Does it always have to be a physician, or can it be a nurse practitioner or a PA?
It has to be a physician. Okay. Guardian of the person. Guardian of the person, we have to make sure as guardians, what we do is we have, the probate court says that we need to make one visit. And of course, it depends on their needs. Everything is revolved around meeting their needs. What do they need? Medically, socially, everything, all the above. And so we need to make sure that they are being cared for. They have supervision, protection of the ward, that the ward is with food, clothing, medical care, and shelter, and that the wards, we can consent to the ward's necessary medical, psychiatric, and surgical treatment, other than we cannot consent to inpatient psychiatric commitment, and that's TPC 767. Every once in a while, we get cases where there just needs to be a coordination of services. That doesn't happen very often, but sometimes people in the community, they just need those services, such as medication management, or maybe move into a nursing home or such, and there's not really, they still have the capacity to make decisions for themselves. And so every once in a while, we do that. And the alternatives to guardianship of the person, here's a list, is the medical power of attorney, the legal document, the directive to physicians or living will, DNR, consent to medical treatment, and surrogate decision makers for those ICF MR facilities. Okay, many times this is the kind of scenario that we walk into when we do our investigation. I had a man, he's 73-year-old ward, and his income was over $5,000. He lived in a nice neighborhood. His house was paid off, but yet he didn't have running water or electricity. So that's where we came in. And here's just another picture of, and this is, what dementia looks like when things start going downhill. But now, today, he lives in a senior apartment. He receives maid services. The doctor goes there. He receives 3 meals a day. He has medication management, and he's not socially isolated. He has friends at the senior apartments, and they have activities. He participates in those activities. This is the kind of coordination of services that we do as guardians. Now, Jocelyn Wilson will talk about guardian of the state.
Hello. I'm going to talk about guardian of the estate, but we all handle guardian of person and estate, so they're mixed together. They can either have one, the other, or both. So when you're responsible for handling someone's estate, you're responsible for paying their bills, collecting whatever resources they have, selling property if need be, but you need to go through the court to get permission first so you don't get in trouble. And when we do get appointed guardian of the estate, we have to set up a monthly allowance with the court. So that's whatever you expect them to spend monthly for room and board, mortgage, food, medicine, anything that we have in our daily lives that we have to pay for, we need to set that up for them. So unfortunately, there's always going to be emergencies that come up. And so you can do an application to expend funds with the court, permission before you do it, or to ratify, like, to get permission after the fact. There's also an inventory that needs to be done with the court 30 days after you get appointed of the estate. That is anything that is of value to them. So if we get someone's house, get appointed a guardian of the estate for someone and they have a house, we're going to go into the house, go through their items and see what's of value and make an inventory and turn that into the court, because after that, annually, on the anniversary date that the oath was signed, we're going to do an annual accounting to account for anything. We could find stuff after the fact, maybe mineral rights that we didn't know about when we did the initial inventory. So we're going to include that in the annual accounting. Also, items depreciate in value, so we can change that on the inventory to show that. Also, there's a notice to creditors. I just had an attorney that I work with do that. He put a notice to creditors in the newspaper, the local newspaper, just so if there's any debts or anything, they can send the information to him so he knows, or so possibly they can get paid. There's investments sometimes that we do. We do work closely with several attorneys here in Galveston that really help us with that. Okay. Their assets could be real property, personal property. Real property is going to be anything like a house, anything that basically can't be moved, like mineral rights. Now, personal property is something that I could take, a value maybe out of the house, like an expensive painting or something like that. And as guardians, we have to make sure that we handle their estate as a prudent person would. So we have to make sure that we're making good decisions with what they have. And also making sure that what they have lasts them hopefully the rest of their lifetime. If not, sometimes they have a lot of money and then they spend down and then they qualify for Medicaid. There's a copy of a legal notice. It's not one that we've done. I just pulled it off the internet, so it's nothing fancy. This is an estate that I had. The person was actually in Galveston County, but his property was in Houston, and Martha and I went out on this one. The house, you could tell that the gentleman had been going down for some time. He was pretty much a hoarder, and the whole house really looked like that. We had to hire a hoarding cleanup crew, get permission from the judge to get the house cleaned up after we went through what we could. And when the hoarding cleanup crew got there, the electricity had been turned off, and he had dead animals in the freezer and refrigerator. So yeah, they can be pretty bad. You never know. So okay, there are also alternatives to guardianship. They can be a power of attorney, durable power of attorney. That's I'm sure y'all know what that is. It's a document that someone can execute before they become incapacitated so that their wishes are carried out. Also, community administrators. A spouse can handle an estate after the other spouse is deceased. A trust. There's different kinds of trust. A Miller's trust can be someone who has a little bit of income, but they don't qualify for Medicaid, but their income is not enough to cover their, their room and board at the nursing home, so they do a Miller's trust. A court registry is where your funds are held at the court, and you withdraw the funds through the court. In money management, we actually have a money management program in our office, a pay-ship program where we set up monthly budgets for all of them, and we have a financial administrator that automatically sends out checks to the nursing homes or wherever we tell her to send them out to. So that helps things go smoothly. So I think that's it.
I want to mention that Galveston County is the last resort for taking on a ward under guardianship. Limited money, of course, we know that big bad word. There's only 4 certified guardians, so we do look for families. The report may come from APS, they do investigations, then it goes to Debbie Diaz in the court and she re-investigates, and then it comes to us and we re-investigate again. We are definitely looking for family or a friend or someone who will take over, because once it lands in the court and the guardianship is granted, that's pretty much, it's it. It's very rare that you can untie that bomb at the court. I've maybe seen 1, maybe 2 cases, but it's very, very rare. So we take them on till the end. We also do the burials. You know, when Misty mentioned the hats that they wear, we go to the funeral homes and prepare the funerals, purchase the coffins, and, you know, talk to the preacher and tell him a little bit about this individual. So we're at the graveside. So it involves quite a bit of compassion, I should say. And I've told my guardians that, you know, I cannot teach compassion. That's something I don't teach. You have to want to, because you care about people and love people. And when you do that, you're going to do a wonderful job with it. You're going to get into it. So I have a wonderful group, you know. And as I mentioned, you know, the cases can be challenging. Very few cases that we do have family, and when we do, we have the family dynamics. The ifs, the don'ts, you did, you didn't. So there's quite a bit here. The job never ends. It's 24/7. Consents, you know, you may get a call in the middle of the night. You have to wake up and make that decision. A call in the middle of the night, someone has passed away, and hopefully you have in your memory file that the funeral home is over there so that you don't have to run to the office. So it entails quite a bit. Relationships in the community. The wards are placed in the proper place, depending on the monies that they have. They may have a check for $600. Where can you go live for $600? Maybe they don't belong in the nursing home yet. They need a personal care home. And we've discovered that good personal care homes are hard to find. And I don't think it's just Galveston County. I think it's everywhere. Because everything involves the money, the food, the care, the medicine. It adds up. So when we get in a state that has a little money, we're like, yay, we can do something with this person. It feels good that you can provide that great place for that individual to live. So this year was the first year we decided that we'd do a little Christmas party, and you know, it was just an idea that came across. And we thought, you know what, let's get them out of that environment, whether it's in the nursing home or in that personal care home with all the others, where we can give them individual attention. And it was wonderful. We got donations from the community. You know, everybody got a gift, so we kind of spoiled them. So this turned out just so good. And the only thing was it was Christmas time, so you know what it's like at Christmas time. We're like, we're going to have to change it. Let's do one big birthday for everybody. But it's been wonderful. The girls are great with what they do. You have to have energy. That's the second thing, not just compassion, energy. And you have to have the energy to keep going with this, because you have to switch lanes all the time. They can have a schedule on their little calendars, and all of a sudden you're way over here. Then you have to come back to that. Judge is calling on something, or the attorneys are calling on something. So yes, guardians do wear many hats. They do the birthdays, they do the funerals, real estate, property, family, court hearings, attorneys, go fill medicine boxes, and the list goes on. It's a great program. We do limit. We try to put a cap on what we take in, because if not, it's not gonna work. So we work real hard at trying to find that family. And again, thank you very much.
We have some, you know, time, a few minutes for some questions or anything.
Anybody have any questions?
Anything anybody wants to?
Do you guardians get paid?
The county salary, yes.
And how are they qualified?
They're certified, they have to take a test. And now the new requirement is 4 years of college now.
We have a bachelor's degree.
In
different
fields.
Different fields,
Yeah, different fields. I was telling, I think Jaws a while ago, you know, someone that I was talking to, you know, the probate code, you know, it's a real big book. You can just imagine something I don't understand the language myself, but
You know, that has not changed much. What has changed is our society, the people, the new challenges and inequalities, whether it's the housing, the money, or more mental illness out there. So that's what's changed. Back in the day when I first started, it was very simple. Somebody's lights are out, or you know, that person lives alone and they don't have anybody. But now it's bigger. It's bigger than that. So you have to challenge yourself and put on a good thinking cap so you can make right decisions and channel these people where they need to go. And I have discovered that they were the most wonderful people in the world because they're people just like us, and you never know where you're going to land.
It's true.
Yes, ma'am.
So what services for mental illness do we have for people in this situation who have limited resources in our community?
You mean if they're referred to for guardianship?
Send them to MHMR or?
We work with MHMR, yes.
On the Garden, East Garden, take how many patients? Like take care of how many?
Right now you have what? Like
Over 70 total.
total.
70.
So
Wow.
they average about 20 apiece, maybe. You know.
Okay.
I always say the easier ones are the ones that live in nursing homes because you already have your nurses
Yeah,
there.
nursing home, yeah.
It's the ones that live independently. You go knock on that door, you don't know what you're going to see. You're like, why are you doing that? What's happened here? You're not taking your meds? So that requires more of your
Yeah.
time when a person lives independently. Or, all, you know, they're not there. Where are they? Misty was challenged one little man, but she got him a little cell phone, you know, and did he ever call you? But he had the funds for it, you know. And he was high functioning, but there was still that something there, you know. Anyone else? Okay, great. Thank you.